walk through the ocean, and it was like wall, but it was huge. They walked through the Red Sea, and the entire water split in half because they were getting chased by people that wanted to kill them, the Egyptians. So they got it, the whole ocean split in half so they could see the floor. There's fishies on the sides of them in the water as the walls, and they walked through it. And then guess what happened after that? They went to the wilderness. Guess what they said? Even though they saw a big miracle of the ocean getting split in half and the Egyptians were chasing them, and then the water closed on them because they're like, charge! And they're riding their chariots, chasing them down, and they're like, oh no, let's get Granny. Come on, Granny, walk faster, come on, he's about to get us. And they're chasing them down, and right when they all get out, imagine over 1 million people. This was a lot of Israelites. They got out, they climbed out of that whole area where the ocean was. All the soldiers were chasing them down, and guess what happened? The water covered them and drowned them. Drowned all the people that were chasing them. And so they saw that huge miracle. But then guess what? A few days went by and they started to complain. And they said, "Why, Moses, why did you bring us out here in the desert? We could have stayed in Egypt where there was a big pots of food and onion leeks." And he's like, "Do you not remember they were whipping your back and you were a slave building their pyramids?" And they're like, "We don't care. At least we were fed." And he goes, "You know what? God started to his glory."
What the heck?
Oh,
a wizard!
A race.
A wizard pirate!
Whoa! I've come to join the story.
Oh,
I
no.
was a part of this.
Yeah!
Okay.
Don't hit me. Go sit down.
Maybe.
Aaron said you may lose Granny.
Okay, so basically they had nothing to eat and they were complaining. And guess what happened?
What?
This big cloud came and was like, it was like booming, and it was God's presence. And he told Moses, I need to talk to you. So Moses was like, okay. So he left the millions of people that were complaining because he was kind of like their leader. And so they were like, "It's your fault. You brought us out here. We have no food."
We were
And so,
hungry.
yeah, they were hungry. And so they were complaining. Their bellies were aching. And so they said, "You should take us back to Egypt." He goes, "You don't want to go back there." And so anyways, God said, "Here's what I'm going to do for them, Moses, because they keep complaining. I'm going to make it so that whenever the dew comes down in the morning, you know how the grass gets wet when you first wake up in the morning, if you ever go outside?" He said, "There's going to be this little white stuff that looks like tiny little, like frost." Have you ever seen like frost when it's in the morning in the winter time?
But it was in the desert, which was crazy.
Yeah, and so it was in the desert, and they had to collect it off of the top of the wilderness floor. So like there was some sand, but there was little pieces of grass too. So it looked like frost everywhere, and it was over 1 million people. So you would need a lot. Not right now. They would have to collect it. It was like powder, and they would have to collect it for their family. Like imagine your family, how big your family is. It's like more than 12 people, right? There would have to be half a gallon. You know what a gallon of milk looks like? Imagine half of a gallon of that powder for each person. And they would mix it with water and turn it into bread to eat. But God said, if you guys gather too much, it's going to turn into worms.
Which was so gross.
Yeah, and so some of them didn't listen. And guess what happened? They're like, "I'm going to have enough for tomorrow." So they gathered more than half a gallon for themselves to make more bread. And so they ground it up into one of those little things and poured water in it, baked it up over a fire to have more bread. And they woke up in the morning because they're like, "I'm not going to work. I'm not going to collect any of this stuff. I'm just going to eat my bread that I made yesterday." And guess what?
My brother did that. And you know what was in it? Worms.
And it stank.
Ugh.
And it stank. But there was one.
So stanky.
There was
The
one
whole
day,
house smelled.
because these guys, you guys were slaves, right? So you worked every day. You didn't get a day off or a weekend.
Yeah.
And so they were going to work every day. But God said, "I want to give you a weekend." That's where we get the weekend from, is from this. He called it the Sabbath. He
Thank
said,
God.
"I want you to have one day where you don't gather any food, but the day before you can get a whole gallon for each person. Bake your bread, and on your Sabbath day, I just want you to hang out and have a good time. I want you to have a good, like, restful day. I don't want you to have to work at all." The reason is God wanted to be able to speak to your heart. If you're working all the time and stressed out, you're not able to hear God's voice.
Yep.
And so they gathered it, and some it said they gathered too much, and some gathered very little, but they all had enough. And then the people that gathered too much, they had worms in their stuff. So they learned after like 1 or 2 times, they don't want to have to gather it, make it into bread, do all that work, and then there's worms in it the next day. So they're like, what's the point? But it looked kind of like, this artist did an illustration where this is what they gathered. And you know what they called it in their language? They called it, what is it?
Manna.
And that was how they said it, manna. So they called this stuff manna, is what they ate. And you guys know what it tasted like? Because this was a supernatural food from heaven. You know how long they ate it? How? 40 years. Imagine getting up every day of your life, going out and collecting manna, making it into bread, except for on Friday, because their day of rest was Saturday. So Friday they collected bread for 2 days, and then they made it, and they rested on Saturday. But every single day of your life, for every meal, you ate this. Guess what it tasted like?
Manna.
It tasted like honey. Yeah, let's ask him. He was there. What did it taste like?
Oh, it was delicious. Honey wafers. It was amazing. I don't know if you've ever had honey and a wafer, but combo them, and it was great.
There's some ancient writings of the Hebrew people, and you know what it says? That it reminded them of peaches and cream. Of the taste. Who's ever had like peaches and cream?
Mr. Wizard Pirate, did you have chocolate syrup with it?
No. That probably would have been great though.
There's this book, you guys, called, there's this ancient writings that they found like etched into stone called the Talmud, and they've translated it into English, and you know what else they said about the manna? That whenever you ate it, and this is not in the Bible, but they said the ancient Hebrew history says whenever you would collect the manna, that whatever you imagined it to taste like, it would taste like that food.
Oh, I'm gonna imagine
Isn't that
it tastes
cool? So imagine
like
they wanted to eat something else.
It's actually
Imagine
really
it, and they're saying that in the Talmud it said that it would change the flavor, what they wanted it to taste like. So you don't have to eat the same thing every single day, right?
So if you think of,
And that's a heavenly food that God provided every single day.
That's amazing.
And then what happened next after
I
that? Do
think
you remember?
I do.
What happened?
We wanted meat.
They wanted meat, so they complained again. They're like, this isn't meat, this is just bread. We don't want bread every day for 40 years. And so God sent
Quail.
Do you guys know what a quail is?
It's a little bird.
It's like one of those birds with a cute little feather on top of its head that like dangles like that.
And they flew
He
down,
sent so much quail.
and there was quail everywhere.
And they ate that too for 40. It says God was actually
40
upset
years.
because they were complaining, and he sent them so much quail that it was coming out their nose.
40
They were eating so much of
years.
it that it was like too much. He goes, okay, if you're gonna complain, then I'm gonna send you so much. They were eating it so much that they actually were like, okay, we're not gonna complain again. We're gonna be happy with what you gave us. And then what happened after that?
how they catch it.
Well, there was an oasis,
And it had 12 wells.
and the water was bad.
Yeah, it was bitter. When they drank it, it gave everybody diarrhea.
It was terrible.
And so
I had
God
to look
told
for
them,
a while.
God told them a miracle. He had Moses cut down this tree, throw it in there,
Oh yeah, that was so cool.
and it made the water so that all the little microorganisms and bugs that was making them have diarrhea in their stomach and make their stomach hurt was gone. And so they all were all healed. And he said, if you guys listen to me, then you will be blessed. And all the boils and the all the sicknesses that were on the Egyptian people, he said, I will not put those on you. If you will just listen to me, you'll be blessed.
And it was worth it. That water was great.
And then what happened after that?
Well, then we traveled, and we kind of started complaining again, because we were traveling for a month and like 15 days, and yeah, it was just getting so hot, and it was pretty crazy.
Hey, Mr. Pirate,
Yeah.
why were you complaining? God said you have to stop complaining.
Well, I realize now that, but then I didn't really think that I should stop.
Why?
I don't know. When you're hot and sweaty and hungry and traveling, complaining seems to come easier.
I know.
Pastor Annie, what's the next part after?
So the end of our story, because this is just what we're talking about, is that no matter what happened, God fed them every day. But if they collected too much, then it would turn into worms. But if they didn't collect enough, God still had it so that they had enough.
And we were brought to a land after 40 years called Canaan.
Why were you guys in the desert for that long? That's like older than I am. Imagine if I was a baby born in the desert with the Israelites, if my mom was an Israelite, and then I'm not even 40 yet, and then I've been in the desert my whole life. Why were you guys there for 40 years?
Well, because we complained.
They complained, and that's what kept them out of the promised land. Is because they complained. But you guys, we've all complained, right? We're guilty. Raise your hand if you've ever whined.
I want more
Has
candy.
your mom ever said stop whining? Yeah, I know my mom has. My mom said whenever I asked Jesus into my heart, I was 2 years old, and she said the biggest difference she could tell in me is that I stopped whining. She said I whined all the time when I was little.
Wow.
And she said as soon as I asked Jesus in my heart, I stopped whining. Like, that was the biggest difference she could tell that I actually did get saved. Because she's like, well, she's a baby. Like, does she know what she's asking God into her heart? But I guess, yeah, I knew what I was doing, and my spirit became new, and so I stopped whining so much.
My mom had to stop whining.
Yeah, you know that if you complain, it'll keep you from your blessing. That's what God was telling them.
I'm going to get going.
Okay, everyone say shalom.